now Matt says I should go faster. So thanks for giving me 5 minutes.
I was just playing with the...
for a quick check-in on Problem Solvers Circle. And I know we already talked about this with DIGFM last month and had a good conversation, and we also got out to talk to several other groups. And we just wanted to check in and remind you that the program ends at the end of Claris's fiscal quarter, which is the 24th of June. So if you are considering it or have clients considering it, there is a deadline. But we've had pretty enthusiastic response. We've had a lot of interest and a lot of purchases, and there's a lot of opportunities open that we hope to close by the end of the quarter. And we know Matt is very excited about it, and one of his clients was one of the first companies that purchased. And we have customers actively deploying forms with Claris Studio, as well as starting to grow their FileMaker use in their organizations. In Vince, it's 24th, so it's the Friday of that week. And one thing that we learned that we thought was really interesting is that this program has been of interest to larger companies more than smaller companies. So the sweet spot has been companies in the 50 to 100 employees, more so than the smaller 20 to 50 employees that is the FileMaker, has been FileMaker's sweet spot. So just happy to answer any burning questions, or if there aren't any, I'll turn it over to Matt.
No questions? All right.
And I also want to say thanks, Matt, for letting the Claris community team sneak in a few questions.
You gave some great suggestions and questions. So yeah, it was easy decision to add them in. So welcome to Fight Club. So we've got this application I think most of you are already in, but if you're not, see the link in chat to open up the database, and the database will allow all of us to vote. Eric, this might be a good time to share your screen. And one other thing I'd like to do is we sent out this meeting to a lot of meetup groups all over the country. Anyone who runs one of those meetup groups, please take a second, take yourself off of mute and give a shout out to your group and where your group is from.
I'll start. My name's Mike Ross, and I have the Claris Western Washington FileMaker meetup. And I see quite a few of our folks have participated.
I'm Phil Yaffe, and I run CAFTA out of Chicago, and I'm not sure how many of our groups showed up, but I think a few did.
Tony White, part of the New York City team. We got some rumblings of having getting back in the game, possibly virtual, possibly in person.
Todd Weller from the FM Berg group in Pittsburgh. I don't know if it was announced at the meetings. I don't know how many have joined us so far.
So there's over 50 people, but I only see 25. I don't know if there's a way to see more.
Yeah. And then we have DIGFM, that's the Developer Innovation Group, FileMaker, that's here in Santa Clara County, or at least the Lower Bay Area.
That's what that stands for?
Yeah. Well, it used to be Database Interest Group or something like that, and we changed it when the Workplace Innovation platform came up.
Our group has changed names. I think we're the Claris Bridge Network. I'll mention that I'm with Direct Impact Solutions. I'm a contractor, but I sold my company AppWorks to them a little over a year ago, year and 4 months, I think, and still work for them in a couple roles, mainly as a trainer and evangelist. I think Andy Lacates and me, maybe the only two people in the industry I know of with a title of evangelist. And I think we're both atheists. There's going to be a lot of points for laughter here, so that one was not a good one, apparently. Okay, Eric, if you want to share your screen, let's just do a quick tour of how the app works, and then we'll dive right into some of the first questions. I will remove all of the votes, and we'll start. So the app has a vote button that you can click on for each thing. And if you click on the red vote button, it will show you, you can cast a vote for high or on either side for either A or B. Each question that comes up, someone will volunteer to sort of argue that side. And you're just going to get a minute or two to do that. So I'd like each question to take around 5 minutes of debate. Some of them will go longer because we care about them passionately. And then cast your vote, and then we'll just see in this group which one wins. And then each winner gets $1,000. No, I'm kidding. There's no money. And then, yeah, you can also click on the number, and it shows you who cast votes for that thing. And if you click on the topic itself, it'll have a little drop down with a little bit more information about what that is. Some of those might be incomplete, but each one at least has something. Okay. Is anybody not connected to the app who wants to be? I'm going to reset the 93 votes that have been cast right now. And we're going to go ahead and start with the first question. Okay, instructor-led training versus self-paced training. Does anybody want to argue? Who wants to argue for instructor-led?
Well, you should, Matt.
I shouldn't really argue a side. I will if I have to, but okay, who wants to battle me then and vote for self-paced?
Well, you don't have to be a trainer. You could just actually have been trained.
Have been trained?
Yeah.
I
What do you
think
mean?
some people are misunderstanding. They're voting. We haven't heard the argument yet. Don't vote.
So yeah, you should not vote. You should not vote yet.
Seems like we need a lockout feature.
Oh, it's okay. If you have your opinion, if you have your mind made up, you kind of can. It won't lock you out. So basically, the idea is I'll make my case for instructor-led, and then I'll volunteer Doug to vote the other side. I think instructor-led training is better because the student sort of has to pay attention when they're in the class. And if they have a question about something that comes up, they can just ask the instructor right then. Also, the way instructor-led trainings are happening these days, it's all via Zoom, and each student actually shares their screen, at least the classes I teach. So you're actually doing the work and building those skills, kind of going through the steps, rather than just, watching a video. Or it's not passive, it's very active, and I think that's why it's better. Doug, counter me.
Seriously?
Yes, you think I was kidding?
Okay. No, okay. Matt's making some really good points, and I do like the idea of working along with the instructor rather than just sitting there and listening to someone or watching them do their thing. But self-paced training allows you to get right at the thing you're interested in directly, skip through a whole bunch of stuff that you already know or oftentimes that you think you know. Because the bottom line is with instructor-led training, you have to wade through a lot to get those nuggets. And I think with self-paced training, you can zero in on exactly what's important to you at that time, particularly if you have been around the block. If you're someone that's new, then having an instructor lead you through things, I think, is more valuable, because they can give you the lay of the land and let you know what some of the things that are sort of have come to be accepted in the community as better practices.
All right. I think maybe the
I just
answer might be
argued both
both.
sides.
Sorry, what?
I just argued both sides.
Oh, yeah. So, well, I didn't, because, your side's wrong. Actually, I actually think
And
that really.
yet I'm beating you.
Yeah, well.
By the way,
I
is the audience allowed to contribute?
Yes, definitely. I just want to throw one thing in before I finish my argument. I really think you need both. I think Doug is completely right about targeted thing. So if you want to learn something, you can look at a YouTube video or go to a class and find that one topic. Okay, comments.
Well, I'd have to say that instructor-led training is probably one of the more memorable moments of my career. You know, people who are still in the community today, I still connect with them, and it's fun to watch their journey and to actually have been influenced them right from the beginning. So
I see at least one person here who's actually taken my classes. I don't know if anyone wants to comment about that.
I would like to make a comment or ask a question to the audience in distinctions in between instructor-led training and mentoring, you know, the pros and cons and distinctions to that. I don't know if we have people in here who have been involved with Jointable as a tabler or as a mentor, but just curious to hear everyone speak on that.
That could be a whole other question, like mentoring versus structured training. And
yeah, it really is.
I think there's some arguments on both sides. I think the problem with mentoring is it's like you don't know what you don't know, right? So when you take a class with a curriculum, you find out stuff that you didn't know. Whereas usually when you're being mentored, you're trying to solve a particular problem, or you're working on a particular project, and so you get mentored on that. But maybe there's some things or techniques or features or something that would be useful for you to know that you'll just never find out. Whereas if you go through a systematic curriculum, in theory, you should kind of get a pretty broad introduction. On the other hand, though, it's I think I've done it. I've been a mentor, not through Jointable, although I think they do great work. But you definitely develop a strong relationship with your mentees, and it does allow you to go deeper, I think, on something than you'll ever have a chance to do in a structured class.
The votes look pretty good on this one.
I've got two brief comments on this.
Yes.
Many years ago when FileMaker 9 came out, I took Chris Hippolyte's training down in Los Angeles, and it was just really fun and fulfilling, and got to go through each individual point, whatever it was he was teaching, and the relationships I built and the lunches I had, I stick with me. And second, many years ago when I led FileMaker Bootcamp, that was literally, for the 7 years we did it, the most fun I have ever had in my life. And we had like 16 different developers speaking. It was just a ball. So there is a place for instructor-led training that provides kind of a personal interaction that you're not going to get on Zoom.
John, I have one word for you: village.
Exactly. She's got it.
All right, let's move on to the next topic. Everyone cast their votes on this one. And the next topic is kind of a topical one for, COVID. Work at home or work in the office? Who wants to argue for working at home?
I'm happy to put my hand up for that one, Matt.
All right. Wait, does someone have their hand up? I didn't see.
Yeah, who loves the office?
Okay, Darren, you're going to vote. You're going to argue?
I'll be at home. Yep.
All right. Start your argument.
I'm based here in Melbourne, Australia. So I'd have a pretty tough commute if I had to head out to the head office of Beeswax in Oakland, California. So it's the ability to sit at home, work all different hours. Started at 5:30 this morning just because of the time zones. That's probably the only negative. I'd probably throw that forward as working home for a different time zone. But at the end of the day, how many people here can actually switch off when they're not working? We're very much focused on what we're doing. A lot of the thoughts come to you away from the desk, and working from home means you can just go and pop those in the system and walk away from the office room if that's where you're working. And it really does give you a better work-life balance.
Good.
Part of that is also being able to go for a bike ride in the middle of the day, which is a big part of my day, and still be productive for the rest of the day. So I couldn't do that as much, you know, from an office point of view. And I get to have the temperature of the room my way as well.
That's true too.
Exactly.
All right, who wants to vote? Who wants to not vote? Who wants to argue for the other side? Steve, or unless
Well,
someone else
as,
really wants
as
to.
somebody who has done both, my answer is considerably different now than it would have been 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, pre-COVID, I was not a big advocate of working from home. I really liked the camaraderie of the office. It was really the only thing that I knew at that point because I hadn't worked from home very often other than, you know, to let the PG&E guy in or, you know, I was getting a delivery or whatnot. But now that COVID has come into everybody's life, I've really grown to appreciate working from home and definitely have found that, yeah, I feel like I'm more productive.
Steve, this is debate club. You have to argue persuasively that the office is better, even if you don't think it is.
I don't know that I can now.
All right. Does someone feel strongly about working in the office? Or is this going to be a slam dunk question?
You need a supervisor here or something.
No, that's okay. All right, vote if you haven't.
Wait a
Is there
second.
anyone-
Wait a second.
is-
Wait a second.
Yeah,
Nobody
hang on.
argued.
Is
Okay,
there
we can
anyone
discuss
here
too.
who's actually? Is there anyone here who's actually in their office right now and not at home?
I'm in my office.
Is it home office?
At home?
No, an office. It's my cubicle
Well,
behind
then-
me.
Oh, okay.
And hence, Corey, you've got your mask on as well.
Mask.
So
I do have my mask on. If nobody else is going to argue for the office, let me take a stab.
Go for it.
Let me share an experience. Let me tell a story. I went to another person and stood in front of them. I could see their face and I asked them a question and they answered. There was no typing involved. There was no adjusting a camera. There was no fiddling with headsets or microphones. I had a face-to-face conversation about a work topic and we were quickly able to resolve it. And it was effortless. It was fantastic. It was even joyful to be in the presence of another person and accomplish something. That's not something I can do at home. At home, my interaction is with the dog or the neighbor's dog that's barking and disturbing me or any number of other distractions. But here in the office, I can be with the people that I work with. And I even like some of the people that I work with, and it's nice to be with them sometimes.
Some of them?
Most of them are gone now, so we don't have to get into too many details, but yes.
Corey, that's a solid argument.
Thank you.
Of course, actually, I cheat when I see people at the office with their mask on Zoom. I go, actually, no, I see more of you when you're at home.
I wear the mask more out of habit than anything else. I'm pretty much the only person in the office that wears a mask too. So we've moved on from the mask days. We'll just so
that's what you look like.
That's sorry, everyone.
We have a lot of questions. Any more discussion on this one?
I will say that when COVID all of a sudden locked everybody down, I hardly used my car. It was like I never used my car. It was like, oh, we're home and maybe just go to the grocery store and get some stuff. But like my commute was gone. And I was wondering, like, hey, all these other people too are not commuting. I wonder how much better the planet is with just less pollution and commuting. And so anyway, I think that was a side effect of people working from home. And I think we've learned a lot in the process of having, I don't know, I guess, proper social etiquette and not interrupting people and letting people speak and muting ourselves and et cetera. So I think we've adapted, and I don't know what the future is going to be, but I do enjoy being in person as well.
I'm going to add on one thing to that, Vince. when you work at home, you can live wherever you want in the world. You don't have to, your home can be where it needs to be, as opposed to within, you know, a short drive to where your office happens to be at the moment.
I'm in Dresden. You know, and there's a huge park that we go for walks every day and right across the street. It's amazing.
Where the heck is Dresden?
Germany.
The
Allow
Eastern
me to
Germany.
counter. There will
Good
be
late
donuts
there.
in the office tomorrow and bagels. I don't have to buy them. They will just be there.
Okay, let's take votes on this one. Let's get into some technical topics because we're nerds. Okay, the next topic is, when you make a primary key, do you use a serial number, so you have a nice natural number, or a UUID, which has no chance of being duplicated unless you make the settings incorrect? Wow, the score for work at home is pretty high. Does anyone use serial numbers who wants to argue them, or anybody who doesn't use them wants to argue for them? I saw some recent stuff about serial numbers kind of coming back, but it's none of us, huh?
I thought Keith told us they could be faster. Plus, if you have a solution that you know is never going to be used in an offline environment, they're simpler to deal with.
Yeah, for me, I use what's appropriate at the time. I try to stay with the smallest thing. So serial numbers are going to be smaller than UUIDs as far as storage goes. But if I have to use a UUID, I will.
You can also use a prefix in a serial number to identify the location or the tables that the records are in, which is kind of a handy thing to do. And sticking a small random number at the end helps to make sure you don't have any duplicates. So,
Why
but
not
generally,
use the UUID at that point?
Well, yeah.
I actually am someone who always uses UUIDs, actually get UUID number, but I can tell a counter example from someone who used to work for me years ago in a laboratory, and I was delighted to tell him that he did not have to number his samples sequentially. He could use any number he wanted, and that when he scanned the barcode, the data for that sample would magically appear, and it was just wonderful. And he insisted that no, he really, really, really liked to have things sequentially numbered. And when the database got corrupted, he was able to reconstruct all of his work because things had been sequentially numbered. So there's an argument that I could not counter.
Well, you can do that and not have them be the primary key. So like on an invoice database, you really need a user-friendly invoice number and probably a customer number. But I think the primary key could be and maybe should be a UUID because I've seen so many systems where in the past, for whatever reason, there was two invoice number 1012s and we can't change it and they're there. So and that would be a case where it would be broken. Anyone make a strong argument for UUID?
So I just want to, can everybody hear me? I want to say something just about the serial number. One of the use cases that is against serial number, not necessarily for UUID, but if you are ever audited by a tax authority, if they see numbers out of sequence or they see missing numbers, they start to assume that you are hiding invoices from them. So that's actually a case against using a serial number, because you don't want to be accused of hiding income from tax authorities.
Yeah, that's true. I think I don't know, I'm not supposed to argue, but what the hell. My biggest reason that I love UUIDs is because you can have a single table that relates to any data in any table and know that you're not going to have a conflict. Like in the past, I would have a customer number 1001 and an invoice 1001 and a note 1001 and blah, blah, blah. So now you can do things that you can have, for example, like a recent record table that just stores the ID in whatever other table you're pointing at, and then know that you're going to get there and the relationship is going to be correct. Any other notes for UUID?
Yes, this comes from my like real life before I came to work for FileMaker and Claris when I was actually a developer as opposed to someone who now pretends to be a developer and who encourages developers to talk to each other. And that is when you are working, and this is also probably less of an issue now, but when you are working with a consultant and you are an in-house developer and they take your files away and work on them for a while and then return them to you, and you need to import data, you need to also remember to then reset all those auto-enter serial numbers before you turn it loose to your users, or you end up with a lot of duplicated IDs and primary keys.
Along with that, serial numbers break data normalization theory because there's no guarantee of uniqueness, and B, because you can append or prepend them with some kind of meaningful abbreviation, then they have some meaning to them, where true primary key identifiers are supposed to be absolutely meaningless. And the only way you can get that is with something like UUID. If you ever done import routines, you're always at hazard of duplication with serial numbers. As Matt was mentioned earlier, if you need them for like a invoice number series, that's what's called a business identifier, the serial number. It's not ever meant to be a primary identifier.
All right, let's vote and move on.
One other thing.
Okay, one other thing, and then we have a surprise coming.
Yeah, well, I think if you're in a schema and you, for some reason, you have a serial number in that table, I don't remember the condition under which it can get locked, and the user cannot generate an X serial number for a record that they're creating.
As long as you have a serial number in your table and you try to add it, like another field configuration, it's going to create table locking.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in favor of primary UUIDs.
Okay, now we have a surprise, which is lightning round. So you can see those ones that have an icon with a little lightning bolt. There's actually supposed to be 3.
Wow, cool. Hidden features.
So these are ones we're not going to have discussion on. You just basically vote what you want to do. Oh wait, JSON script parameters came up as well. I don't know if that was actually supposed to be. Yeah, we can make that one a lightning round.
Who misspelled parameters?
No, actually, that one's supposed to be after these. I think they just got out of order. Let's just skip the JSON parameters for now, because it got out of order. This is why you test things, right?
Matt, you need to add the question about whether you work live on a system in front of the client or not as one of the discussion points.
Run that by me again.
Whether or not you should work live on a system in front of the client.
Oh, no, there's no discussion there. The answer is absolutely yes.
Every time.
Yeah,
No,
server.
No.
Yeah. And then they're like, oh, it only takes a minute to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Why
are you billing me so much?
Yeah.
I actually really like performance coding where you work in front of the client, but it's not for big things for sure. Okay, lightning round. The first one is paragraph with or without the quotes. The second one is P versus NP. And the third one is how you do variables, whether you do them with underscores or with camel case. This is, I guess it's really camel case versus any other way, maybe. So vote on those real quickly, and then we'll go into the next one.
Hey, what's P versus NP?
That is a test to see if you're a math geek or not.
Oh, I see.
There's a problem in mathematics. I don't know if I can really explain it, but basically there's a set of problems that can be easily solved, and there's a set of problems that cannot easily be solved, but they can be tested. P is the solvable ones, and NP is the ones that are not. So there's people trying to prove that one side or the other is correct, and there's not an answer yet. because problems that used to not be solvable now are, even though there's not a lot of them. So that's actually just kind of a joke question. Unless you're a math geek and take it seriously. Okay, looks like we're getting a ton of votes on those. And we'll go to the next one, which is passing parameters when you call scripts. So there's been many things over the years. Actually, Eric, if you click on other method on the text, it kind of lists a bunch of ones that have been used in the past for a parameter passing methodology.
The method I use is not there.
Which one is that?
I build a function that provides the evaluate portion of a calculation, and it gets thrown in so that way when I pull it from the script, I can load all my variables at one time.
Oh, in one step.
In one step, yeah. I got another function that evaluates that chunk, and it populates all the variables in the script in one step.
That's really clever. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to do that. JSON, you definitely have to set up a bunch and then you have to get them one at a time.
I don't have to do that.
You can sort of do it with JSON as well.
Not exactly
Even the
true, Matt.
structure is not too complicated.
We've got custom functions where I can pass a parameter that declares the variable names and embeds them in JSON all in one, just in the script parameter.
Some people would say that code becomes too opaque or hidden, so they can't see which ones are being declared in the script, but everybody.
That's a conversation based on the environment.
Yeah.
I argued the same thing you did, Vince, and then I got convinced the other way. We have when we run scripts, we have two steps. One is to set the JSON, and one is called the variable with the word vars after the name of the variable, so one can open it up and see it real quick. But it really depends on what team you're working with, what you're doing, if it can be opaque or not.
In my example, I can always get I can call the function that is being used to build it, so that way I see the parameter list. And the parameter list is always updated because it's a calculation that drives that function. It's not a great solution unless you have a lot of duplication. Like I use it when I have like 10 scripts that take the same parameters. So I only have maybe 6 or 15 of those functions in my file, and I heavily use those functions.
It sounds like a topic for another meeting, like a whole topic of itself with some demos.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I could dig that out of the file that I use it in, and
that would be awesome.
Some of the functions are a little nasty to write, the middle ones, because you have to escape the quotes, and if you want things to be treated as a number, you have to treat it as a number inside that middle calculation. Otherwise, it gets transposed to a text. So there's some gotchas that you have to watch out for. But if you follow the rules, then you pass everything as numbers, and text as text, pictures as pictures.
Yeah, I was going to bring up that same point that anytime you do anything automatically, the exception will prove the rule. So if you're automatically pulling in all your JSON elements, you don't have much control over them. And as someone who lives down under, we need to control how the date works locally. And once you pull a date into a JSON string, you've lost any sort of connection to the system to say that's an Australian date or a US date. And so you need to control how you define your JSON if you're working with dates in different time zones. And I haven't seen an automatic method for that yet.
Using JSON number for dates works well.
The best method I've found so far is to change the date to an ISO, because then at least it's human readable, so that you can see the data coming in and out. You can get the date as a number, but it's a string. It's a little bit like seeing a UUID compared to a serial number for a record. But if you convert it to a date ISO, then that is compatible to the human developer reading the code.
Yeah,
So you open using the date ISO.
It helps with readability, but not for performance. The math on a number to push it into a date is actually pretty quick.
On measurable performance or theoretical performance?
No, I always say, like, grab a million rows and do a replace with that thing.
Right.
Across all the million rows and try another calc and do the same thing.
That's theoretical performance though, because no one really does that in real life. That's like comparing, like, for UUIDs versus numbers as a key. UUIDs certainly are a little bit slower, but no one feels it in the real world.
Yeah, let's put it this way. We don't have an ISO conversion, so you're going to have to write a calculation for that. And the C++ to actually push a number into a date will run faster. Guaranteed.
Any other comments on that one before we vote?
Yes. I dropped it in the chat. One relatively obscure. We use all three. We pass, or I don't know this for. We pass JSON sometimes. We pass 6 fried rice sometimes. We pass list of values. I had to test it twice to be sure. You can pass styled, otherwise known as formatted text, using 6 fried rice. So if you have a use case for that, 6 fried rice will do it. JSON obviously will not allow you to pass styled text. They're all good.
All right, let's tabulate votes on that one. Take a look at what we've got here. So work at home was a handy winner. Primary key UUID, slaughter the other one. Still the paragraph without the quotes won by way less than I thought it would. FilePaths, clearly people like camel cates as better than underscores. And I don't know if we had enough votes counted for JSON script parameter because the number doesn't add up as high as the other ones do. But maybe we just need a refresh there, huh? Okay, let's move to the next one. So this is basically on a layout. If you need a calculation, you can use the button bar to make a layout calculation versus making a calculated field and, in the schema to display that. So which is the better method? Let's say it's for something that you really only need for this layout to make it kind of clear. For example, if you're on a customer record and you need the count of the number of related notes for this customer that you want to display in a tab or something like that. Okay, who wants to take the side of button bar as layout calculation?
It's like you already argued it out, Matt.
Pardon? Argued it out?
It's like you already argued for the button bar.
I wasn't supposed to do that, but I think you definitely found my bias. Who's wrong, or who wants to convince me that I'm wrong about that and the calculated fields are better?
They may have a demo for this.
Well, I won't say that calculated fields are better, but I will say that I've run into a couple situations, and I don't remember why, but I run into a couple things where a button bar calculation was not working reliably, and I had to find another method, and it was very frustrating because I love button bar calcs.
Unstored calcs pretty much work. If you click on the items, you can see one of the downsides of button bars is they're not searchable. You can't ever search that calculation or sort by it or anything like that.
That's what I was just about to ask you. In your fictitious example, does the customer want to search for the customer with the most notes or anything like that.
And they're not a field either. I mean, with a calc, if the customer needs to go in the field and take the content and put it on a clipboard, he's able to do that. If what you have is a button bar, there's no way to do that.
The button on the button bar could actually copy the content or take you to a pop-up or something else where you can do fancy stuff.
I guess if you had like a off-screen global field, if you click on the button, it could set the contents of the global to the contents of the button bar and then copy to the clipboard and then clear the global. I just forget I said that.
You also might want to export your data, and you can't do that from button bar.
Ah, but you can, because you can copy and paste that calculation to, here I am arguing again. But there's an export method that I use, which is a scripted export where I set all my variables one at a time. And then I don't use the export records, let me think about how I do it. I create a big array, which has all of the export information, and then use export field contents. And it only gives you a text format, but it gives you complete control of how you export data.
Ooh, I like that.
So it's a looping script. It runs pretty fast, but it's nice because you can use the same calculations and don't have to use schema. Any other arguments for either side of that one? And I'll also say I always use a calculated first name, last name field. So it's not this rule is definitely not hard and fast.
I believe you also still can't use the format painter on button bar segments. You want to restyle them.
I think that's true. You'd have to do it a tricky way using object visibility, probably.
Stack the buttons and hide them.
You're talking about the paintbrush? To copy one style from another element to one L?
It does the whole bar rather than the individual buttons.
Yeah, the only way to set an original button or a button to something unique is to set the conditional formatting to true, and then you can set anything you want different than the rest of the buttons.
All right, let's tabulate votes on that one and go to the next one, which this is really kind of pointing to the future a bit, but which is better if you could choose Draco backend, so basically FileMaker server, or NoSQL backend, which is basically Claris Studio, or what Claris Studio will be at some point in the future.
Both.
Exactly. Well, if you want both, you can actually vote middle.
Nah.
But it is kind of a tough one since we don't fully have that option right now to store all of our FileMaker data. I don't know if there's really that much debate that I can do on that one, huh?
I could see a big advantage for NoSQL over Draco is just that, theoretically there would be better tools, external tools that could pull your data out. I'm hoping at some point in the future, that are not as limited by either the ODBC driver or other limitations on getting the data out of Draco at the moment. So maybe a NoSQL backend would have better external access. For analytics and reporting.
Yeah, and I think in some recent presentations, I heard that Claris controls both ends of the pipe. So they have a lot of control over what they can do. So it's very exciting to see where that's going to go. So it isn't ODBC or some other driver or something that I don't know the technicality of it, but anyway, that's what they mentioned.
I would love to see a NoSQL type of data structure in Draco And, they do call these things containers, but not a container field, something akin to it. The idea that if you have data that you don't think really needs to be searchable, like let's say, traditionally in FileMaker, you would create a subtable for types of phone numbers, et cetera, and maybe have that be in a portal. But if you could just have those sort of things in some kind of container object that could be kind of free form, I think that would just be an excellent way to go and cut down on the amount of tables that you have in your system.
I did some research on the way FileMaker 20 connects with Claris Studio. So it uses something called gRPC, which is a modern remote procedure call protocol developed by Google. It's way better than the one that's currently used between FileMaker Pro and the Draco engine. So it's much, in my test, I hope they can use it with the Draco engine, but it's way faster. It runs on HTTP2, supports TLS 1.3. It is not limited to 1 megabyte per remote call. Supports multiple streams at the same time. Hope I can do a presentation about it in the future, but it's quite exciting about the decisions that they took for this integration.
Yeah, so I think you're making a really strong point that Claris Pro using all the data on the Draco engine backend would be much better than storing the data on FileMaker server backend. That's some great testing, Carl. Thanks. All right, let's tabulate votes on this one, and it's time for another lightning round.
Actually, I had one thing on that Draco backend thing.
Sure.
Other database products store data differently. So our calc engine, our date formats, and a few other things are actually quite unique for Draco. So if you store those things on other backends, the date ranges won't be as large, for instance, and the text sizes won't be as large, and the calc engine limitations would be greater as far as we do crazy things like handle 400 digits on the left and right hand side of the decimal point. There are not other database products that do those things that I'm talking about. So it is kind of interesting. But I wanted to mention those things so people are fully aware of when they vote, which way they're talking about, then you're making those selections as well when you're saying don't store things in FileMaker.
All right. I think we have maybe no more comments on that. So the next lightning round has 3 questions like the first one did. The first one is Apex Blue over a custom theme, which may or may not be based on Apex Blue. If you just use Apex Blue, you can have, I'm seeing a bouncing in my Cisco. You can have just that one theme that will work across any other database. Otherwise, custom, you would import it. The next one is using just quotes if you need to set a field to nothing versus making a custom function called null or some other way for readability mainly. And the last one is a travel question. What do you feel comfortable traveling this year, say, to a FileMaker conference, or would you be more comfortable traveling next year, say, to a FileMaker conference? Okay, those are the 3 lightning round questions. So everyone just play the Jeopardy theme song in your head.
Apparently, Matt Petrowski's not in the room if we're talking about Apex Blue, so he won't get bashed.
Yeah. I really like Apex Blue, but I usually make a custom theme off of it and rename stuff.
Is there an author edition of that?
Author edition?
Well, because it kind of got changed, didn't it?
Apex Blue?
Yeah.
From what Matt created?
Yeah.
I don't know. I know he was working within what his direction was from Claris, but he did create it, and I don't know. I think it's not to what am I trying to say? Not to prop them up too much, but I think that theme is by far the nicest theme I've seen in FileMaker. I love it.
Could you tell us a little about it? Because functionality wise, I don't know how it's different from the custom themes, or
Well,
is it just an appearance thing?
It's just really well constructed to be compatible with FileMaker Pro and Go and web for the web direct. But it also has themes and styles that really work in color for all the different types of objects: buttons, button bars, fields, portals. Everything kind of works as a cohesive whole, and there's a lot of really well thought out spacing in everything. So really, it's designed for readability and a much more modern way. And this is really not a good example of Apex Blue on that layout. Okay, let's get those questions answered.
Oh, you know how you can't just type the word null in a calculation, but when you're referring to the lightning rod example of null versus quote quote, is that because you'd create a custom function called null?
Yeah, that's what I've seen.
Quote, quote?
Yeah, because if you're trying to set a field to nothing to clear its value, you can't say set field and not put anything in the calculation, which you think might work. You have to put in quote quote.
How are you using the null calculation?
And then you can also make a custom function, which is just the word null, N-U-L-L.
Yeah.
Which is
And
equal to quote quote. And then that way your code is more readable.
Now, how are you using the null calculation?
It's a ridiculously simple custom function. I'm not using it, but this is what some people have done and have made a really good case for in the past. And so I kind of wondered how many of you are. But it's basically in any kind of a set field or set variable command when you want to initialize something.
Okay, because an empty string is not equivalent to null, and is empty string is a true test, whereas some field equals quote quote is not a valid test.
No, I'm not saying the field would equal quote quote. The field would be null. It would be empty. It would be nothing. But the only way to do that in FileMaker is to say set field first name to quote quote. You can't say, there's no other way to clear it that I know of.
Okay, yeah, so it depends on the usage. If you're just using it for set field and you're saying null, so there's something there in the
it's really just about this is a question. This is supposed to be a really quick one about readability.
Yeah, readability is one thing, but being correct is another thing. So readability,
I mean,
yeah.
If I'm
oh, sorry.
Well, if I'm importing a whole, or trying to replace a bunch of fields and emptying them out, is there going to be a performance difference at all?
That would be one of those theoretical versus actual things.
With the null, you're actually calling a function, which results in quote quote. With quote quote, you're just returning quote quote. It's a 1-op function versus a 3-op function. So technically the null should be slower, but there might be some other optimizations that I'm not thinking of right now that could make it faster.
Okay, so one of those, there's another lightning question that got thrown in down at the bottom again because I didn't properly test when I changed things, which is the development platform, Mac versus PC. So let's add that one into this lightning round.
Apple Silicon.
Sorry, Matt, just to go back a step for context, what is the null custom function? Is it just quote quote inside the custom function?
That's what I've seen in a number of solutions in the past. It's like the simplest possible custom function. It's not even recursive. Okay, so the fourth one that I just changed the sort order on is, do you develop on a Mac or do you develop on Windows? I'm going to cast my votes.
Are you asking if we develop on one platform or the other, or if we prefer one platform over the other?
I guess you can sort of choose.
Because I prefer Macs, but my job has me working on Windows.
And I think you should vote for Mac then.
Well, the
I will. Thank you.
description right there says dev platform dev, right? So
Yeah. I remember a bunch of years ago, like seeing DevCon, and you see almost everyone's computer is a Mac for whatever reason, even though it is a really Windows world. But I didn't think it was actually because of Claris being on by Apple. I just thought it was some other reason I never really knew. Okay, and now we're on to the next question, which is, how do you authenticate users? Or do you, or should you? Darren might win the ping competition at 192 milliseconds. So do you use native FileMaker authentication, where you use managed security and create our users there, versus external authentication such as Google or Active Directory?
I would like to fight on behalf of the native functionality.
Bring it on. Let's hear it.
Okay. So I really like the native functionality, and I'm just going to set up a straw man. External authentication, as Matt says, there's a lot of different ways. I think the most popular is the Active Directory. So in the interest of brevity, I'll just say, Active Directory. It's great. Time and a place for everything. Active Directory, big companies, IT companies managing it. I will say, if the Active Directory server goes down, all hell breaks loose. Whereas you might have a FileMaker server that's 100% up and running. All of the native accounts that you have in there won't even care if the Active Directory service goes down. So if you are doing Active Directory, you better have a really solid infrastructure with rollover and whatever. And on behalf of the native, you can set up a FileMaker sister that will pretty much 100% mirror an Active Directory structure, roles equivalent to groups. So I think both might be a good approach. Smaller companies, I think, might be better off with native accounts. It's a little bit simpler and less IT infrastructure to keep up and running.
how would you handle multiple files?
The account management script steps and there's 6 of them. They do 7 different things. You basically you put scripts in each file. That's a one-time setup. Add account, change account, activate, deactivate, reset. I probably left one out. You put one of those in each file, and then you have a central file called something like Security Manager, and you just loop. There's a little bit of setup on the FileMaker structure, but you just loop and you push the appropriate data into each of the 6 different scripts with the appropriate list of values, and you just loop through and it sets. Pretty straightforward.
Yep, I've used things like that.
And I've used Active Directory. The only big negative I have is working sometimes with contentious IT to get that set up. But other than that, if you can get Active Directory running, if you got a 50 file solution that dates back and use Active Directory for the security, you don't have to list all the users. You just have to kind of list their groups, but you can still get the username on the get function. So it really simplifies managing security in large solutions.
Anybody want to argue strongly for Active Directory or other external authentication?
I'll argue for it on the picking up on the comment Mike just made. It'll help you win arguments with recalcitrant IT, because it's like you just go to them and say, hey, you know, if you want me to work and play well with your standards, then let's use Active Directory, and you can control password strength requirements, password reset, time frame requirements, username, naming convention requirements. You can control it all, right? And you hand it all over to them. It also reduces the number of your users who have their username and password to your FileMaker database written on a Post-it note stuck to the bottom of their keyboard.
That is true.
Which will also win you friends and influence people.
Yeah. And any breach is going to be more likely their problem than your problem.
That's the other thing, is you can walk away from that and say, you know.
Right. And then when they get fired, it's somebody else's job to turn off their one account in Active Directory, and they're off for all systems. Any other arguments or discussion on this one?
It's on the same sort of. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I think it's good to use an OAuth. I mean, any kind of authorization in Active Directory is a good one, because they're already, for HR purposes and for using other apps, having to manage a user. And so have a one point of contact is pretty good. The other thing is, when you have any compliance issues, you know, from NIST all the way down and HIPAA and all the others, Active Directory helps you not have to deal with that, because sometimes you have to provide an external authorization. So in that sense, I like it.
Yeah. And just on the similar line of discussion about the IT departments, if you can walk in there and say, I can authenticate to Amazon, Google, Azure, Okta, let's say, you know, Apple Connect, if that's coming, you're going to win points. You know, it's that simple. I can do those. I don't have to, but I can do all those. It doesn't become a sandbox issue of passwords and access.
I would say for the big companies that do have a team that can competently manage an Active Directory structure, it is an opportunity, and we've certainly done that, to win. Once again, for the smaller companies that might not have that infrastructure, it's another opportunity to make a sale by offering the full scope and the full range of the FileMaker platform.
I have a nerd question. If you've got a database running on a FileMaker server that connects to people in several different companies, or let's say 3 different companies, is it possible to have 3 different Active Directory servers connected to one FileMaker server? Alexi says no.
Say that again?
So like if you've got a single database running for multiple different companies, and each company has their own Active Directory server, so the 3 are not connected. Is there a way to connect to even 2, let alone 3 or 8?
Well, each company would not allow you to use the same Active Directory. But if you wanted your application to work at all 3, you literally have to use the same group names for your solution on the
Yeah, you clearly would have to do that. My question is it even possible for FileMaker to connect to multiple Active Directory servers?
No.
The server has to be a member of the domain that the Active Directory is.
Right, and it can only be in one domain.
Yeah, you can connect to multiple external auths, because the database server can be configured to do that, but you can't have multiple Active Directories, because it's just the machine is bound to the domain, and the machine can only bind to one domain. It's not a FileMaker feature. It's an OS level piece of functionality.
Yep. So you could have Google Authentication and Active Directory on, of course, but not. Okay, I think that answers my question.
And I think it would be a good topic of conversation some other time about Active Directory versus other OAuth.
I think we actually did that one in a previous one of these, but I don't remember that. I can have to look that one up. But yeah, that would be interesting if we didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one is, go ahead and cast your votes on this one. Let's see how it's looking. I see people voting for other things too. Yeah, so external authentication is winning pretty handily on that one. The next one is when you start a solution from scratch for a new customer, do you start with a template file or starter file of some kind, or do you start from file new blank?
Well, I'll chime in on this one and say, well, I'm a little bit in favor of the starter file, but not certain things about starter files. Like I don't like starter files that assume certain kinds of schema. Like every solution is going to have a project table or an inventory table, or like stuff like that. However, there are a set of custom functions. There are certain assumptions as to there is going to be a list of users. So there's a person table, and there is some management of sessions and logins for those sessions and etc. So when we refer to starter files, that's what we think of in terms of starter files. And so we're starting really from almost a blank slate. So, whereas some other people, I think, refer to starter files as they already have some schema in there, thinking that every solution requires these kinds of tables.
Right, like for example, like a built-in note system, maybe like a person index that's correctly built, logging, things like that could be in it. Some of the ones from a lot of companies are very fully built.
Yeah.
If I debated against having a well fleshed out starter file, is that usually they tend to have a degree of abstraction to them, and then get further abstracted to be able to make it fit the mold of the current use case. I think it ends up becoming really murky code. So Vince's idea to have, it's sort of my idea, to have little bits that you can implement into your solution, the comfort tools that you're used to using. My approach is that I will pull data from other tables from other projects, things that I might find handy, like a table of states and abbreviations, and yank that stuff. But to build a fully fleshed out thing, people are buying into FileMaker because they need something that's customizable. And sometimes I think when you come in there, with a kind of one size fits all solution, sometimes it's more work to modify it to fit the customer than to start from scratch.
It'd be interesting to have a meetup where you actually compare a few different of these starter files and table solutions and things like that.
That would be interesting.
Feature in FileMaker where you start off with default fields in a table?
So
there's an issue about if starter files, like, are we talking one file or multiple files? We'll start projects sometimes. Some of them say we want image management, so we'll have a standalone image management file. We might have a standalone tag file. That seems to give you a little bit of a head start on adding what is specifically wanted if you have individual files rather than a monolithic file.
I mean, I think we would start completely from scratch if the add-on framework was like kind of supporting even updates, and there's hope in the future that will come. But add-ons as they are now, especially for updates to things, makes it a little tricky. But yeah.
We have an environment with 10 servers, about 200 files, and almost 500 users. And I don't run I'm not the developer that manages the servers. It's all external authentication. But I understand from the server guy that we have to start with fresh files every time we build something, because there's some kind of ghost information in the security structure with the accounts, almost like corruption, but not really corruption, but it gets locked up in a way that you can't undo it. So I guess it is corruption. And the only way around it is that we have to start with new files and import all the custom functions and everything else that you might need moving forward.
Are you referring to the file ID?
I don't actually know exactly what it's about, but Chris says that it's something to do with the account structure on external authentication that you can't, it doesn't perform properly.
Like if you start with a starter file or start with some other database that's already working, you mean?
Yeah, because our starter file would be something that already has all the accounts and privileges.
Right, yeah. That's
right?
interesting. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, I would have to research more information. I don't know a lot about what's causing it, but we just have a carte blanche rule that you're going to do a new file, you're starting from scratch, bring in what you need.
I think, Vince, you might be onto the answer. When you duplicate a database, does it have the same file ID?
Huh. Interesting.
I don't know.
You shouldn't.
I don't.
We used to have to clone files to get rid of something like there's a file name that gets ghosted in there as well.
Oh yeah.
That was 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, no, it still does. You can see it on the
an external
containers. The external container still has that weird name that you can't change. Huh. So never start a database with a swear word as the name, and then change it to something that's not awful when the client sees it, because eventually when you have external containers. Okay.
We've also seen old file names pop up in print dialogues. Had customers ask, well, what is this? That's not what our file's called. And I'm like, huh, right. Interesting.
That sometimes goes away if you clone the file, but.
Right, yep.
The print structures we get directly from the system. So when we open up a brand new file, we'll ask the system what your page setup is and etc. And we just take that and store it in the file. So it can have old file names or whatever the OS is actually saving in the print structure. So yeah, save as a clone or just reset your, be that admin logged into the file and no one else logged in, and change your print driver and it gets updated.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things that you have to do with the file not hosted though. So
you have to be the admin and be the only user in the file, or do it locally. Yeah. Hey Tony, if you're having that problem, try save as a clone, and if you're still having the problem, then connect with me with that and I'll try to look at it for you.
That was someone was having a problem, not me, not Tony. Maybe there's another Tony.
It was okay. I thought I saw Tony White as the name on the screen at the time.
That's a generous offer.
Yeah, and I
wish I had a problem.
The privileges issue.
Oh yeah, that was John, I believe. John Howell.
Okay. John, get a hold of me.
Okay.
Try save a clone as no record, or sorry, save a clone with no data, and try to do your thing again. And if the problem goes away, then we know that solves it. But if it doesn't go away, then connect with me.
I'll do that because we do clone the files and we still have the problem. So.
Got it. Okay.
But give me your email in the chat, will you?
Yeah. Okay, give me a sec.
Okay, let's cast votes on that one and move to the next topic. We're getting down to the wire. We've got, what, 10, 15 minutes left. So far, the most, I would say, imbalanced question is Mac versus PC. I think it's kind of funny. And there's a couple of other pretty big ones. Nothing is right on the split line, though, looking at all the scores. Except the joke question, P versus NP. Okay. So on-prem versus cloud server. So this is basically an on-prem server in the building, in your server closet, basically, versus any type of cloud server. So that's either using the Claris hosting, using a hosting provider, or having your own server running in AWS or wherever. Which way would you go here? So I'll take, I think the format of having just discussion about it rather than picking a champion for either side has worked really well tonight. Or in the middle of the night or whatever time it is in Australia. Or Europe, it's quite late. Benny, you're really up late.
It's Vince, it's up late. I'm here at almost midday.
Oh, okay.
It's almost beer o'clock.
Except he is tomorrow.
That's true.
Exactly.
You have to change your background because it looks like nighttime there.
Yeah.
Send us the lottery numbers.
Yeah, exactly, the lottery numbers.
So, what do you think for on-prem? Who likes that? Of course, this is one of the many questions that are. It depends.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Exactly. Yeah.
It depends, because I'm working with a customer right now who they have their servers, on premise because they're doing a whole bunch of data manipulation and exporting directly from FileMaker. They've got 1 million records in their products table, that kind of stuff. And so for them, it makes a lot of sense to have it on premise. There are obviously lots of advantages for doing some kind of cloud hosting, because then, you don't have to worry about, with this particular customer is in South Florida. So, you worry about hurricanes and all of that. And if you're doing cloud hosting, then, you're letting your hosting provider take care of it. So yeah, it definitely depends.
And I think that use case only really makes sense if all of the users are in the same building. Because it sounds like the argument for that was mostly based on performance.
Yeah, it's actually all the users are local, but then they're extracting a bunch of data and doing some manipulation on it and things like that before they then send that off to their web service, the website as well.
Right, but I mean their interaction with FileMaker is all on their LAN as opposed to the WAN.
Right.
Yeah, because I think that's the main advantage. And also, like, on in the dire circumstance when you literally need to go kick the thing, right? By which I mean like physically press the restart button. But otherwise, I think the hurricane argument is very compelling.
Right.
My ideal circumstance is a cloud that I can remote into, not just FileMaker admin console, but actually also remote into the box. To me, that's my happy place.
Right.
I think this is aligned with the discussion on whether or not you can work from home or work on the client site. With the pandemic and the digital changes we're making, if we're working from home, and a lot of us have changed the way we develop our code in the last 2 or 3 years, to say that we can't assume on-prem. We can't assume that we've got a good connection to the system. And you start developing in a method using transactions or local storage of data to send the data backwards and forwards, you'll get the same throughput whether you're on-prem or coming off a cloud. There aren't too many cases where you can't code in a way that you'll get the same performance. So that's kind of an old argument as to whether you work at home or whether you work in the office, or whether the server has to be in the office or you work at home.
I do have a customer who is a photographer, and he's shooting lots of images. He has hundreds of thousands of images. Doesn't always have them accessible, but he does have a database that is tracking all the images, and he uses it as a way of filtering the images and doing everything else. And I haven't thought about moving him to the cloud simply because, moving the image database itself, and they're all referenced. The images are referenced. They're not actually stored in the database file, because when the original file was built, you only had a 2 GB limit. It was back in the old FileMaker 6 days, so it's migrated up over the years.
Wait, referenced meaning they're not just externally stored, they're actually...
Yeah, that's right. They're not externally stored. They're actually just sitting on a server and they're referenced.
That's terrifying.
Is that a one-user
well, the
database?
advantage is he can back up all the images easily without having to worry about and the database separately. So it's actually the backups are much easier this way.
Is he the only user?
Yeah, because of COVID. He is now. He wasn't.
My only, I much always prefer a cloud server of some kind. I deal with a lot of clients, and I seem to have more issues with getting FileMaker servers set up when IT is doing it on premise. That seems to be very challenging. I understand that in many cases they're doing this for what they perceive to be security reasons, HIPAA reasons, or firewall or whatever, but it always ends up being more challenge to connect to their databases and to develop for them. So, I mean, I think I probably spun 6 hours of time trying to get FileMaker servers shored up and correct on on-premise systems where I could get that immediately just fired up on the cloud, AWS. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, that's a solid argument.
Yeah, most of our clients are, with hosting with us, but we do have a few on-prem. One of them has, it seems, just horrible luck with their internet, whether it's their provider going down or over this winter, like a car hit the utility box in front of their business and knocked them out for a couple days. And then this spring, the people putting in the irrigation cut the line between the box and their office. So, they went a couple days without internet or phone, but inside their FileMaker server worked on their local network and they were able to keep production going.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I have one client who's had their virtual box on premise go down 4 times, once on New Year's Eve, another one Memorial Day, and 2 times in between, meaning the hardware that supports that virtual box was having issues. And you're not going to see that in AWS.
Those were just drills, I'm sure.
Yeah. I'm just glad I wasn't drinking those days.
We've all got our stories. Just an issue on performance. I have a client that we spent 5 years trying to get them to move to the cloud. The argument was that the system was started in FileMaker 2. There's currently 50 files, and they were scared about the performance going into the cloud. We're actually getting much less latency and faster access to the system without changing one line of code, because the remote desktop server is in the same data warehouse as the database itself, and the only thing being sent back to the client is the mouse clicks and the screen updates, where on their local network, they were getting slower access and latency through to the server from their workstation sitting on Ethernet.
So your folks are actually, in this case, are using like a remote desktop to access.
Yes. The remote desktop is accessing the FileMaker through that pipe. We have had to do a few workarounds by mapping printers through to the local network and integration with the local email clients. But the performance was highly surprising as how quick it is, because they're right next to each other, even if they're on-prem in the same office. So the local network can cause you issues as well.
Kind of weird because we've had the server like on premise, like in a closet right in the same building, and then we've had it centralized to the center of the campus, and then we've even experimented with cloud-like servers that were centralized to the state. And every time we jumped further away, we could sense the difference. It was actually slower, and of course, pinging it, we could see
the school systems have some crazy good networking though.
Yeah.
So you'll see the gradual progression of being slower and slower when you go further and further away. My interest was like, what type of local network did they have that made the local network slower?
Exactly.
Yeah, and you know, if it's a small company with on-premise server, they're, you know, they are also responsible for maintaining that server and maintaining the network infrastructure, something that they may not have the skills to do.
Mm,
Yeah. So that's, you know, it's all circumstance.
was the local network like a 10-year-old or 20-year-old network, not on gigabit, but on 100
Had gigabit backbones. We weren't running fiber between switches. We still had 100 base T to the workstations. There was wireless in the office.
100 base T.
It was still Cat 5e. It hadn't gone to 6, but you'd still expect that a 100 base T network would be faster than accessing it from 300 kilometers away. But you just can't make that assumption.
Making me think they were using their personal hotspots.
It's really the 100 base T, because that's like 20-year-old network connectivity. You're not gigabit to your desktop, which is the standard. In fact, there's a lot of companies who are on 10 gigabit to desktop, which, I mean, it's arguable. There's a lot of people on it and a lot of people not.
I don't think FileMaker benefits that much. When I remember way back in the day when I went from local talk to 10 gigabit Ethernet, or was it even that? Thinking, wow, this is going to be so much faster. We're going to go from 230 kilobit to 10 megabit, and it was not even twice as fast. And every change in connection between the client and the server with FileMaker has only given a small gain from 10 megabit to
the network
to
topology and what you do on the network. Like, if you have some security guy like sending all the packets through some sniffer system to see if it has any, what is it called, malware or anything like that on it, then yeah, your ISMT is gonna like slow down your network.
I'm just talking about like on a normal network for FileMaker client connecting to FileMaker server. It just I haven't noticed a huge change from on all those other things. Other things have affected it. The number one I think that I've seen affect the performance of FileMaker server, this is pretty off topic, is whether the server's drive is spinning or SSD. That is
that's a big
everything.
thing too.
Doesn't matter how much RAM you have, doesn't matter how fast your processor is, doesn't matter how fast your Ethernet connection, none of that. If you have a spinning hard drive, your server's going to suck.
How about if you have a spinning array of hard drives?
You can put 20 drives in an array and it's not going to touch an SSD for access time. And this is super biased, but that's what I'm sticking to. You can also make an array of SSDs. Also, one of the reasons I love cloud servers, because like the AWS product and what you can get is nuts for speed.
SSDs are awesome. We have one system that's running on relatively old hardware. I'm not even going to say because you're all going to make fun of me. What's good about the deployment is that it does have SSDs and it's got the operating system on one SSD, the data files on a different SSD, and I think the backups are on a slow spinning drive. And that seems to be, because you're spreading the I/O out, does seem to be an architecture that can leverage older hardware. By the way, I thought what Darren's example was really, really interesting, where it's a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison, because you are comparing, Darren, if I understood you correctly, you're comparing the sending data over the wire, between client and server versus the screen deltas and mouse clicks. And I do think that's a very, very interesting deployment option, which, as you've indicated, seems to come with some trade-offs in terms of integration possibilities. I thought it was an interesting story, though.
We've reached time, by the way, so the last two questions I'm going to hold till the next round. For anybody who has to go at this point, because we're at time, thank you very much. This has been really fun to host this event. I don't know if you're going to stop recording now, but we can see anyone who wants to stick around and chat more about whatever.
We don't have a hard stop at 7, actually.
Okay.
I'd be curious.
I came
Matt.
here to. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask if Matt wants to share with us the questions that were sponsored by Claris in the mix.
Oh, I don't know if I would say sponsored, but like Rosemary came up with some great ones. One of them was like the specific way for the cloud versus on-prem. I think she just wanted to know the answer, this one. And I can't believe how close it is. It looks like cloud's edging up a little bit. A second ago, it was actually 59 to 61. She was also asking about 2022 versus 2023. And instructor-led training versus self-paced. I think that was yours, Rosemary, right?
Yep, that was ours.
Was there a fourth one too?
Where's my notes?
Draco versus SQL is one I think both you and I had back end.
Oh, the other one was the other one was server OS, which you didn't put in.
Oh yeah, you're right. I didn't. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
I think we might have covered that before. It's so fun, like arguing with people who want to use a Mac server like a Mac Mini with not a single redundant anything.
And consumer grade.
Even though they're pretty reliable. I don't know. It's always a fun discussion.
Had a little Mac Mini keep going down in the data warehouse that the client insisted it was a Mac Mini. So we put it in the data warehouse and every now and again it'd go offline. And I physically visited the data warehouse and the Mac Mini wasn't in the rack. It couldn't fit. And so they'd actually put it on top of the rack and the Ethernet cable was going down past someone's workstation. And someone was physically kicking the Ethernet cable out the back of the Mac Mini. And that's why we're losing contact with the server regularly.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
Those darn Mac Minis.
When I was in tech support, I had a customer every day take his floppy disk out. I was in tech support a long time ago. Take his floppy disk out and put it on his desktop. And every afternoon, his database would get corrupted because the sun was beating it to death. So
there was a time Andy Lacates' daughter had the class rabbit at home for a week, and it crawled under his desk and ate through his cable.
My rabbit ate my homework.
Yeah, he was on our systems engineer conference call, and he was like, "Well, sorry guys, but like I have no internet because the rabbit ate my cable." So.
Oh, that's so great.
This same client, we'd moved to the data warehouse because the on-prem server, I walked in because they were complaining it was playing up. I opened the server room and the painters had put a towel or a blanket or a tarp over the top of the server array because they were painting the server room. And the drives had cooked themselves.
Yep. Things like that. I don't know. I had a couple clients who had servers in Katrina that ended up underwater and they lost everything, server backups, all the computers in the office, like that hurricane thing or a fire or theft or.
Yeah, I'm wondering how large that hard drive array was for the server. Because that could be.
Who paints the server room anyway? I mean, come on.
Yeah, it just stays out.
That's true too.
I mean, that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on how many NASs and how many hard drives. And...
It depends if the server room is actually under the stairs. You know.
Oh yeah.
Harry Potter's closet.
Yeah.
And I've been watching Linus on LTT, and he has one petabyte server. It was like $70,000. So yeah, it could easily be under the stairs and fit in that situation.
checking ping times here.
Yeah, just for fun.
Looks like I got beaten a few times at the top there. Who's up the top?
We have Vince's iPhone.
There it is. I'm going to call that cheating because I'm on a fiber to a MacBook Pro. I think if I took my phone out, I'd probably get higher than what I got now.
But
And then,
can we see what our ping time was within our open, or can we not see that?
oh, if you hover over your name, you can see your own on the.
Hey, wait, mine's 17 right now, so I should be the fastest.
There you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you landed right next to the server.
The first
Now,
time I
is Vince in there
connected to my
twice?
iPad.
Whoa, everybody's talking.
Sorry.
That Vince in there twice under Drew Simpson.
I didn't know that, Darren.
Who?
I'm pointing at Vince there underneath David Simpson. Because I had a look at the
How'd you do that, Vince?
Because that one's coming out of Oakland.
That's right.
Smart. Yeah, the AWS server is in Oregon near Hood River, and I'm in Portland, so that's why I have fast access. This has been really fun. I can't believe we made it through all the questions. In previous rounds of this, it just goes for a crazy left turn on one of them. We get a 20-minute discussion, but this was really great to get through these. Some of the results went so different than I thought. What about you guys? What was the biggest surprise in this?
I just can't believe how many deviants use a paragraph symbol without quotes around it. What's wrong with people?
Agreed.
They're not necessary, though.
Deviants.
It's the principle of the thing.
Sorry. They
Some
are
of these work
necessary,
too well,
but
they
more
need to
than
be
one.
surrounded by quotes.
Yep.
So it's a matter of consistency.
That only works because it's actually a function.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I wish I could chain them though.
Matt?
Just have to add an ampersand in between them.
Oh, that's right.
I use both, and it depends. If I have a string already,
Whatever.
then I just slap it into the string because there's other characters there already. But otherwise, I try to use the function.
I've been using the list function instead of the paragraph a lot of times. You can just use list on blah, 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 and then it automatically puts them in, removes the spaces.
The problem is if you have an empty one, it shifts everything over.
I believe list also requires a minimum of two values. So if I only have one thing that's going to go into list to start with, I'll put empty quotes, carriage return, and then the one value if you want to use it for formatting later. You can't just have one value in the list function. Hey, Matt.
Do you use empty quotes or do you use null?
Yeah, empty quotes. I just did a quick scrape off the Pause on Error website. Looks like there's 90 people signed up so far. And comparing that to your participation list, it looks like roughly 8 people here are going. I'm wondering how accurate that is and if people are interested in going to Pause on Error.
I'll be there.
Yes, I saw your name.
Yeah, last year was great. Looking forward to it again.
We're sending a few people, but it's a bad week for me, so I will not be there.
Yeah, we'll miss you.
When is
I mean,
it? I
that's
think I knew and then I forgot.
The last week in October.
Yeah. I can't go. I'm in training for a Spartan race, which is 2 weeks after that.
Nice. That's more important.
37 days.
I know, but I've already committed to it. So, and I'm on a team and I can't let them down. So
So what is a Spartan race?
it's 10K, but there's 25 obstacles. So you have to crawl under barbed wire and carry 50-pound sandbags and climb walls and rope climb and all kinds of crazy.
Any donuts?
Wait.
Donut obstacles where you have to eat donuts on the way?
Very funny.
I was going to say, we have a thing like that in San Francisco, except instead of obstacles, you stop at bars and have a beer. It's a
Well,
little.
that sounds difficult as well.
You're not very
It's
tall.
hard. By the end, it's very hard.
You know, the funny thing is that actually would be much harder for Alexi than what she's talking about.
That's true.
That's unfair. It's like lift half my weight. That's not right.
I know they've got one weight for women, but like I'm 5'2.5" and I weigh 107 pounds, and I still have to carry 50 pounds, even though there are women who are 6 feet and weigh 150 pounds, and they're carrying the same 50 pounds. So I just have to
It
train
should be
harder.
some percentage of your weight.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I do exceptionally well with body weight exercises because my ratio is good, but so
Are they still going to electrocute you in that race?
I mean, the name is Spartan Race, so it got its name from somewhere.
Yeah.
I think they're trying to emulate the Spartans who beat the Athenians way back. I don't know, but had reputations for being tough warriors.
Yeah, Spartans would stop feeding their own children, teaching them to steal food to manage to subsist. You know, so and
there you go.
pretty rough.
Maybe that's why Sparta's such a crummy place right now.
It's been 2,000 years plus, and they haven't gotten over it yet, right? So
no, that's not why.
Speaking of which, I'm actually off to a training, so it's been great hanging out with you guys. Now I got to go work out.
All right, see you, Lexi.
See ya.
And I'm gonna head out as well. Thanks.
As am I, because it's nearly past my bedtime.
Yeah.
You know, I do actually have a technical question that maybe some people might be able to have a quick answer for. This, I'm working on this customer project where it's a FileMaker 6 database, it's like 20 years old, and I'm converting it to FileMaker 19 for the guy. One of the things he really likes about FileMaker 6 is he can use the scroll wheel on his mouse to scroll through records. And he says, is there any way of doing that with FileMaker 19? And I've not run into that before. I mean, I just tested it.
Oh, you mean in browse mode, not in list
browse
mode.
and records,
right, right.
There's a simple answer to that. Get a Mac, because a Mac will still scroll the records.
If you move the cursor right over it, I think.
Oh, really? Oh, let me see.
I haven't tried that in a long time.
I think there's a gesture on Mac that will switch records to. And other than that, you can check perhaps that the MBS plugin will let you alter the mouse wheel behavior for a Windows machine.
Yeah, and you can do the same on Windows.
Because I'm trying it here on 19, and moving the scroll wheel on the Mac is not doing that. You said I have to be over it somewhere.
That used to be the behavior. I don't know if it is still.
It's super dangerous because I used to have people flipping their scroll wheels, typing in one record, tapping the mouse, and then continuing to type in another record.
Another record, yeah.
That was such a disaster. I'm glad that went away.
Yeah, I think that's why they did it.
Yeah. So, same here. I remember getting into some debates on the community or TechNet or whatever it was called at the time about someone who really wanted that feature back. And I'm like, no, it's a bad idea. Be gone.
The OS actually took away a bunch of things from us. Not that we changed things. Like I use Ctrl-up-arrow and down-arrow to navigate records. The OS took away that from us from a long time ago.
Yeah, but that's a simple fix as a keyboard setting on the Mac OS.
Except that you can't tell
Windows
people how to do that. They'll never figure it out.
Control up arrow, down arrow still works.
Yeah, it still works.
I'm testing it now.
It doesn't work if you pop it on a brand new machine.
Right. The default setting does not work. It will like.
Yeah, so I had to go into keyboard settings, find FileMaker.
It's hard to get users to do that.
And change the menu items to have those keyboard shortcuts. And then the OS takes it from version to version to version after that. But I had to do that when I lost it. You just keep on upgrading machines, Eric.
Yeah.
What about Control-Shift-Tab? He's using that to like switch between files because there's like 155 files in the solution, and the users have multiple files open. Does that seem like something that
It's supposed to be Control or Command tilde. I believe that's the standard Mac OS.
I think the best thing about this meeting is I thought I was crazy, and now I know I'm totally not. When people talk about 155 file solutions.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? He loves FileMaker because it doesn't crash, and it has survived ransomware attacks. He loves it. It's great, but it's time to upgrade.
It won't survive all ransomware attacks. I guess on a Mac that old, maybe it would, huh?
Well, he's not using it on a Mac. He's got it on Windows, but they're copying their files to AWS and their backups and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, they've lost computers in their infrastructure that they've had to rebuild. But yet, FileMaker server, hey, everything's fine, and they've never lost anything, been compromised with FileMaker. So they love FileMaker.
Yeah, that works in FileMaker. Command tilde.
Okay.
That's the standard Mac OS keystroke for moving from window to window.
Inside an app, and Command Tab to switch apps.
Okay. And tilde.
Yeah, Windows versus apps.
Yeah, they're probably using it most on Windows. So there's got to be an equivalent on Windows, I'm sure. I don't know what it is, but
that's another.
I have run into where that command tilde just stops working, or it like stops working one direction. You can get to the end of the list and then you can't go further, but you can shift and go back. It's quitting FileMaker and opening it back up restores it, but one of those weird things.
Oh, interesting.
So and David, it's funny because I think Eric said next month Christian will be talking about MBS, but in the chat I've put the actual reference to the MBS function that you can use to have the mouse wheel behavior that you're seeking. It's just again, like others have said, I think your best thing would be to convince the user that it's not a feature he needs or wants.
Well, we just had a 2-hour meeting today, and he said he's almost thinking about not switching to FileMaker 19 if it does.
Oops. You can get up for all of us, huh?
Yeah.
I think Claris must have cut him off when it's not switching to 19.
That's right. I can't listen to that anymore. He's gone.
Don't support anything more than 2 versions old. And we won't allow discussions for FileMaker 6.
Thanks, everybody. 2 hours past my bedtime. It was amazing.
Where are you at?
I'm in Toronto, but I'm on yogic time, up at 3.
Oh.
So.
Nice
Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
Namaste.
Thank you, everybody.
Great conversations and debates. Thank you.